The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
A big win for the Teamsters. UPS agrees to limit its buyout program. Journalists at ProPublica engage in a one-day strike. Meanwhile, the Writers Guild reaches a deal with Hollywood producers. And today on the show, the Food and Commercial Workers Local 3000 in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to the Monday, April 13th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Faye Guenther will be our featured guest on the show today. She serves as president of UFCW, that's the Food and Commercial Workers, Local 3000. The website is ufcw3000.org. This is a local with about 50,000 members working in grocery, retail, healthcare, meatpacking, cannabis, that's a big field now, and other industries across Washington State, Northeast Oregon, and Northern Idaho. Now, that local 3000 is a chartered member of the UFCW International, and International has about 1.4 million workers in North America. Lots to talk about with Faye being a newcomer to America's Workforce. We'll get a little background on her. She had quite an interesting history. She was raised by a single mom outside a town of about 150 people in rural Oregon. She started organizing workers back in the late 90s, and she organized workers up and down the West Coast. And she started with UFCW Local 1001. That was back in 1999. She also worked for the AFL-CIO Organizing Institute, SEIU Local 503. Went to law school, graduated back in 2008, and returned to Local 21 as a staff director, eventually becoming recorder, then secretary-treasurer, then president in 1999. She's going to talk about how the local grew. A good part of that due to consolidation of other locals. We're going to get into corporate consolidation. You remember when there was the possibility that Kroger's and Albertsons were going to join together? Well, because of the work by organized labor, specifically the food and commercial workers, that didn't happen. That didn't happen because that would have meant a lot of job losses and higher prices at the grocery store. We have seen that so many times and times again. So Faye Guenther will be our featured guest right here on America's Workforce. And now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. We're talking $38 billion of assets under advisement. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Big win for the Teamsters, one of the many proud sponsors here on America's Workforce. UPS has agreed to limit its buyout program to about 7,500 drivers across the country. Now, the union sued UPS back in February over that program, which is tied to the company's broader goal to cut 30,000 jobs this year. Under the agreement, buyout offers will be made to long-haul feeder drivers and regular package car drivers based on seniority, with those who accept receiving $150,000 in early retirement payouts. Now, according to the settlement, Sean O'Brien, who is the general president, emphasized the workforce's contributions to UPS's success. And this is what Sean said. Rank and file Teamsters have given their blood, sweat, tears, and most importantly, their labor to ensure UPS's success for a century. This agreement is a powerful reminder to executives that the Teamsters never want to harm the company's ability to be competitive, but We will also never tolerate any violations of our contract or our members' rights. Sean O'Brien, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Journalists at ProPublica engaged in a one-day strike last week after more than 2 years of contract talks, which really haven't gone anywhere. Over 100 reporters, copy editors, and communications staff, all represented by the Communication Workers of America's News Guild CWA, engage in the action to protest the company's refusal to bargain over wage increases and layoff protections. Importantly, the workers also cited the use of artificial intelligence as a sticking point in those negotiations. Now, ProPublica has so far rejected any restrictions on replacing jobs with AI, which is a position that one member of the union's bargaining committee described as head-scratching. See what happens there. Last month, the Writers Guild of America, which represents Hollywood screenwriters, began negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents studios and streaming services, for a new contract. Well, good news. Last Monday, they reached a tentative 4-year deal that protects health care, increasing royalty payments for streamed content, and ensures that AI does not lower the writer's compensation. The deal arrived a few weeks before the union's current contract was set to expire on May 1. The contract still requires ratification by union members, which will likely happen at the end of this month. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the president of the Food and Commercial Workers Local 3000 in the Pacific Northwest. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland at 216-881-1802. Call Music Talent of Cleveland as your dependable source for professional musicians in Northeast Ohio. Union musicians add harmony to weddings, elegance to parties, and uplifting music for all events. Music Talent of Cleveland contracts solo and ensemble musicians as well as bands and orchestras for single engagements. So hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland today. 216-881-1802. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest today. And that would be Faye Guenther. Faye is president of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 3000. We're talking about a local with over 50,000 members working in grocery, retail, healthcare, meatpacking, cannabis, and other industries all across Washington State, Northeast Oregon, and Northern Idaho. UFCW 3000 is a chartered member of the International. The International has 1.4 million workers in North America. And I'll tell you, you know what I love talking about on this show is organizing. And if you go back to the late 90s, Local 3000 had about 8,000 members. It fluctuated between 8, maybe 12,000. And now they have 50,000. Well, the person behind it all, I'm going to give you a lot of credit for this, Faye, because I enjoyed our conversation before we started recording here. You've come a long way. You've come a long way, and you ain't done yet. Talk to me about growing up. I understand your mom was a single mom. Why don't we just start there? Because it's important to showcase the guest journey on this show. I always use this as a teachable moment because, well, I tell you, in America, you could do just about anything. A lot of challenges, let's be honest about that. Challenges are more for some than others, depending on what zip code you're born in. But you saw something that you needed to do. And talk to me about growing up and how you became president eventually of a 50,000 member union. Go ahead, Faye.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was raised by my mom. She worked in the potato fields, and she worked as a flagger, and she worked because she needed to raise my sister and I. And we lived in very rural parts of Oregon. We kind of were nomadic, so we went all over the place to follow the work. But I ended up in Spray I was homeschooled for a while, but then I ended up in Spray, Oregon, which is a little town of 150 people. My grandparents lived there, and they had a small, I called it dirt farm, because they had basically some pigs and some cows, and we lived there. And I grew up kind of farming and sold my first horse for my first car. Really loved school a lot. And my science teacher actually helped me get a scholarship to go to school at Oregon State University. Went to school and I loved it. And at the university, I got very involved with MECHA and the witness in the field programs, going out to see what was happening with farm workers at the time, which was pretty atrocious. There's problems right now and things going on that are really horrendous with immigrants. And at that time, there was also stuff that was happening where people were being paid very poorly for what they were doing, blueberry picking, that sort of thing. And so there was a program called Witness in the Fields where ministers and others could go out and visit the camps that were on the fields and see what working conditions were like and do some advocacy there. So that was sort of my entry into the labor movement. Spray didn't have any unions. I think the first union my mom was ever a part of was the Flaggers Union. The only thing she told me is there was a whole bunch of initiation fees. But I do remember that it was the first time she got a pension and the first time we had health care as a family.
You saw the union benefits at an early wage. At least your mom did. Okay.
Yep.
And then you found your way to law school. I mean, was that something you were thinking about for some time or what?
I always wanted to go to law school, but I didn't have the money. So I graduated from Oregon State and I went to work as an organizer for SEIU, organizing Stanford hospital workers. And I organized workers all up and down the West Coast. And then when I paid off my loans from Oregon State University, I went to University of Oregon School of Law in 2005. And then I did labor law, business law, arbitrations, became a certified mediator, and then came back to work for UFCW in 2008 to be a better advocate for workers. I felt like I needed to understand the law and understand how businesses work so that I could effectively strategize with workers about how to take on corporate power. And so that's why I went to law school, and I'm licensed, but I don't practice law. I run the union and I have attorneys that work with me, but I work with workers to leverage every piece of power we can, whether it's at the bargaining table or legislatively, to advance workers' rights. And you do need to understand how corporations work, how they're incorporated, how monopolies work, how corporate power works, to effectively have a strategy to win, basically.
Let me ask you this. When you were in law school studying labor law, there was probably a lot of things you didn't like about labor law, the fact that it's so darn weak, which is pretty much by design. Did that inspire you? I mean, did you do anything to try to change things, especially in that area of the country? Because labor law, I mean, nationally, it's just ridiculous. I mean, there's so much more that can be done for workers, and it's so difficult to do that. But when you realize how weak it was, what did you say to yourself?
So, I mean, this is the thing I've been thinking about a lot. We pour millions and millions of dollars into trying to elect the Democrats and the Republicans to change the laws. There's been multiple laws that could have been signed into effect that would have benefited workers. The politicians never have the will to do it because there's so much money in politics. So much money in politics. And what I think has to happen, laws follow people. We need a movement of workers demanding more. I didn't want to represent one person at a time. I wanted to build collective power because when you have collective power and you have a movement of workers, the laws follow the workers. Just like when the robber barons had everything in the massive like sugar trusts and railroad trusts. And what happened is the farmers united, the rural farmers and the urban workers were facing terrible, terrible working conditions, and they united and they demanded change. And that's what helped break up the monopolies in the early 1920s, right? And that has to happen again. We're in that moment again where there's massive consolidation of wealth and power in the hands of the few. The workers do not have power, and the laws are structured because billionaires are controlling everything and controlling what's going on. And we have to build worker power. In my mind, that's the only thing we can do to protect our democracy and make things better for like working people.
If you take a look into history, and we've talked about this on the show many, many, many times during Roosevelt's administration, FDR, I mean, it was a giant leap forward for workers, which continued with Social Security and Medicare, all those changes. And then what we've seen here in the last couple of decades is an unwinding of all of that.
Yep.
And we have to stop the madness. I want to talk about the pandemic here. Because, and we, boy, I tell you, that was a crazy time in America. We saw a lot of organizing, especially with unions like yours, because these were people that had to work. And they had, I remember they had heroes pay because you're showing up at a very dangerous time where you can lose your life. How was the organizing during that period? Because you were in the middle of it all then, Faye.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we organized more workers during the pandemic. Under the Trump administration, even when he tried to ban the NLRB elections, we were winning elections. And part of it was the fight we took to try to win hazard pay, the fight we took. The first case of COVID was treated by our healthcare workers at Providence up in Everett. I don't know if the first person who died, but the first person treated for COVID was up in our Providence hospital. And our healthcare workers were running out of PPE. They were wearing garbage bags to work. And we decided to fight for more PPE, to fight for hazard pay. And we won. We won some of it, but it was organizing. And those fights helped inspire other workers. And we built for several strikes. And those strikes encouraged other healthcare workers to start organizing with us. I think that the main lesson for me is that when you fight, other people want to join your fight. People know something's wrong. They can't afford their house, even when they work full time. They can't afford the gas. Well, especially right now. They can't afford their groceries. And they are sick of it. And they can turn on each other, or they can unite together and say, I'm going to demand more from my employer. I'm going to demand more from my government. When you have a strategic fight that people want to join, it makes them feel like they can do something instead of just being hopeless. So that's how we organize workers, is we went out, we fought, and we had them join our fight. And that's the way it went.
Yeah, organizing is one thing, as you well know, and congratulations on taking the union to 50,000 members. And I want to talk more about that. But what about getting first contracts? You know how difficult that has been to nail those down. How would you assess what you've done at Local 3000?
So that's actually my niche. Like, that's my specialty. That's what I was brought into the labor movement to do, was to build for strikes for first contracts. And in 1999, I built for 4 strikes. We struck one statewide hospital, Providence. We were building for a strike at Capitol. We were building for a strike at many of the units that we had organized. When you talk to workers, you have to make sure they understand, this is going to be a fight, and your employer is going to fight you. You don't have a union until you have your first contract. So we have to stick together. We have to be united. We have to have that strong organizing committee. We have to understand all of the ways that the employer is going to divide us, all the scare tactics, and we have to stick together the whole time, even if that means, and it could mean, that we could strike. And getting that conversation early so that people understand the expectations, and also, like, that first contract is more important than anything. You do not have a union until you have the first contract, so you have to win it, even if it's not everything you want. A union contract isn't going to fix everything. It's not going to fix the housing crisis. It's not going to fix starvation in the streets. It's not going to fix the drug crisis, but it's going to do something that gives you permanent infrastructure, permanent power in your workplace that you can build on over time. So you need to focus on what matters. You need to build for a strike, and you need to win your first contract, even if it's not perfect. And so that is kind of what I've been doing within the labor movement for a long time. We have a very good track record of organizing and winning first contracts. There's only 2 units that I can think of that we haven't won first contracts at. And that is probably statistically that is some of the best out there. There was a LabCorp unit. I'm still pissed about it. I was pregnant with my son, walking that picket line, and LabCorp is a massive national corporation. We only had 1 small unit. We worked with the workers. We decided to withdraw the petition, and it was heartbreaking, but one of the things we also learned to that is many times workers have to try once, twice, 3 times before they win their union and their first contract. So workers should never give up. They should fight and organize even if they can't win it the first time. They will win eventually if they stick to it. There was that unit, and then there was a Storyville coffee shop here that we organized. This was a couple years ago. We got so militant, and so I won't go into the details, but we ended up withdrawing that petition. But I hope those workers want to join, organize again, and you can see that coffee workers around the country are organizing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Never say never. Faye, I got to take a quick break here. Faye Guenther is our featured guest today. She is president of the Food and Commercial Workers Local 3000. Here's a website you want to go to. It's UFCW3000.org. UFCW3000.org. More to come from Faye right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Also appreciate the fact that you, as a listener of America's Workforce, for 3 years in a row, making us the #1 union podcast in America. We do appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. AW@podcast.com. All the shows are posted there if you miss one. Right now, we're talking to Faye Guenther. Faye is president of the Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 3000. They're on the Pacific Northwest area. We're talking 50,000 members in grocery, retail, healthcare, meatpacking, cannabis. Washington State, Northeast Oregon, Northern Idaho. Now, just to be clear here, when you were with the union back in the late 90s, you were telling me earlier it was about 8 to 12,000. It kind of fluctuated with membership, but your growth has been the result primarily, well, partly and primarily, I guess. I don't know the word of choices here. If there were some mergers along the way that kind of, and it's important too that there's strength in numbers. And obviously, because of strength in numbers, that's made your union a little more vocal, a little more assertive when it comes to the bargaining table. What do you think, Faye?
Absolutely. So yes, 1001 was the healthcare sec part and the retail part, and we merged with the grocery store 1105 union to create UFCW 21. It was after the big strike in California where we all realized we had to be together to bargain. We needed political power. We need community organizers. We need organizers. So we needed to merge together to build power. And then later on, we also merged with the meat cutters union, and the meat cutters were in the back of the store and the grocery clerks were in the front of the store, and we needed to be together. We needed to be together at the bargaining table so we could fight and win. Our growth came through those mergers, but it also allowed us to invest in organizing, and we have one of the largest organizing departments in the country for UFCW and potentially other unions too. And we spend those resources not just to do buy more buildings or whatever. We invested in organizing and building for strikes. And we now have a $33 million strike fund as a result of those mergers. So we invested in those two things, getting workers strike ready and helping workers organize their union, and also doing a good job servicing, bargaining and enforcing those contracts. The result of the merger gave us the power to do more organizing and to bargain effectively and build for strikes.
That is a very impressive strike fund you got there, over $30 million. I'm sure a lot of people wondering right now, how did she accomplish something like that? That's pretty good. But like you pointed out, you got the largest organizing group there. And what are your targets right now? You're pretty diverse. You're in retail, you're in grocery, healthcare. Any specific areas that you're trying to organize right now, Faye?
Yep, absolutely. So we used to have 90% of the drugstore industry organized and under contract, and it slipped down below 10%. And now it's almost zero with Rite Aid and Bartell going bankrupt. We need to build power and strength in the grocery industry. We cannot have a tipping point where we lose industry power within grocery. We want all grocery workers to be in the union. We are working with any grocery store workers who want to join our union. We are going to have a huge bargain in 2027. Those non-union workers can join our bargaining table and be part of that bargain and help win contracts for their grocery stores as well. We also used to have, just when I got back in 2008, we had 2,400 Macy's workers. We have 400 Macy's workers left. And the reason is because of Amazon. Amazon bought the downtown store Macy's. Amazon is the largest retailer. They are going into grocery. They're going into pharmaceuticals. They're taking work away from the Teamsters. They're taking work away from drivers. They're taking work from all of us. We have to organize Amazon. So Amazon is in our target, in our line of sight, and we are going to organize Amazon someday. That is one of the key ways to save our democracy, because the tech bros have taken over our democracy and they have creeped into every part of the work and made it so workers can't have full-time jobs where they can make a living and have a house and buy food and take care of their children. So Amazon is in my eyesight, and that is who we are going after, Amazon. In healthcare, obviously, any remaining non-union healthcare in the state of Washington is in our line of sight, and we will be aggressively going after all remaining healthcare workers in the state of Washington. We will be expanding into Idaho, and we will be in our area of Oregon for any grocery store workers who want to be joining our union. So that's our primary target, and obviously there's a big beef plant that is in the state of Washington that should be in our union, and we are on a pathway to Tyson, and someday we will get there. Workers obviously want to join our union. I hope that they do want to join our union, and we will spend resources and time until all of Washington is union, and Idaho, and my part of Oregon.
Faye, if you don't mind, if we can go back to Amazon, because I know the Teamsters, and you mentioned the Teamsters here, they're very, very vigilant to organize Amazon. And I'm wondering about territory here, because I have to ask, are you working with them? Are there certain parts of Amazon? Explain that part to me.
I believe that the primary goal is for every worker in Amazon to have a union, and I have no interest in territorial disputes. What I have interest in is the Whole Foods workers, the grocery store workers that are in Whole Foods. Amazon bought Whole Foods. That is what I'll be focusing in on, and I'll be gladly helping any Teamster, like anybody who wants to be organized as Amazon. I will be fully supporting that, and any dispute. The Amazon's too big for us to we have to all take them on. It's going to take $100 million, $200 million a year to take on Amazon. None of us can do that individually. We have to do that together. And we have to set aside all of those old broken relationships and all those old disputes, because we have to unite as a labor movement in a way we've never done before and take on Amazon, take on Walmart, take on these big corporations. And then we can, on the backside, fight over who gets who, and we can divide up the money. Honestly, at this point, I'm like, let's all merge together for a while. Teamsters, SEIU, UFCW, let's all merge together for a little bit. We can break apart later and take on Amazon. I don't care how we do it. We should set aside our fights. We can get mediators. There's professional mediation services out there. We can divide up the money. It is our obligation to working people to rise above our bullshit from the past and organize workers. And if we do not do that, right now the labor density is at 9.9% and going down. It's not going up, even though we had a good year last year. It is shrinking. It is shrinking. We are not even keeping up with the growth of the workforce. It's a shame, and it is partially labor's fault. It is also mass consolidation of power and corporate power and these big corporations, but it is our own bullshit that's getting in the way of building real worker power and our not focusing on what will build true power for working people. And some of this may be controversial and you can edit it out, but the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are failing working people, both of them. Billionaires own both parties, and they are not putting workers first. They are putting their political careers, or I don't even know all of them. And I know there's good politicians and all that sort of thing, but working people are getting screwed, and it's by both parties. And we need to stop sending all of our money to those parties and start building real worker power so that both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, listen to workers, because we have enough power. But when we only have 9.9% density and we're all divided and we're all doing different things, we don't have a unified voice for working people. And workers' wages are going down, and they can't afford to have a basic life that's worth living. And then workers turn on each other. They don't feel like they have power to change things. So that's on us. That's on us. That's labor's fault. That's organizers' faults. And we better get our act together before we lose our beloved country, before we lose our democracy. So I don't care about jurisdictional disputes. I don't care about who hates who. I don't care. Organize workers. Just go organize workers. Get ready to strike when necessary, and stop messing around before fascism takes over and destroys all of our lives.
The old line is organize or die.
Organize or die. That is right.
Yeah.
It's right.
Yeah. One more thing here. We're speaking with Faye Guenther. Faye is president of the Food and Commercial Workers Local 3000, the Pacific Northwest. We have about 50,000 members. Kroger's and Albertsons. Well, I remember when they announced that some years ago. That was, I guess, priority number one for the UFCW, and it was a win.
It was a huge win.
Let's talk about it. How did that happen?
Oh my God. I mean, so first of all, the grocery industry has been consolidating for decades. It used to be multiple employers, and then Safeway, remember, bought Albertsons, and Kroger bought QFC and Fred Meyer's, and there's been this mass consolidation in the grocery industry, which has caused a massive decline in workers' bargaining power and consumers' power. And so these big, massive corporations set the prices, do all this crazy stuff in the grocery store industry. Anyway, Kroger Albertsons on October 22nd, I think 2022, I may have that wrong, announced they were going to merge. And immediately, within 2 hours, our union and a coalition of other unions came out, opposed the merger. And we did every single thing we could, even when people told us, oh, it's never going to work. Stop fighting it. Just try to negotiate a deal where you get the rest of Kroger to be union, or you get this money in your pension. And we were like, no. We saw what happened when Albertsons and Safeway bought each other, and Town and Country, 138 stores, went bankrupt, went out, right? That was supposed to be the way to keep it not to be a monopoly. Anyway, we lobbied every AG we could. We lobbied anybody who would talk to us. We set up a Stop the Merger Coalition. We went to Washington, D.C. We saw Kroger's CEO and Albertson's CEO testify before the Senate and lie on the Senate when they were testifying. We filed a lawsuit to try to block the dividend payout of Albertsons. They paid out $4 billion before the merger, which we thought was gun jumping and anyway, so we tried to block that. We lost. But because we got discovery, we got all this financial documentation, all this stuff that showed that much of the stuff they were saying in the media was not the truth. Then we got the FTC and in Oregon and Washington, the judges to file a suit to block the merger. And we won in court. So we won. Workers won. They were organizing. They were building for strikes. And then the court system actually worked and blocked the merger. And Lena Khan, who's wonderful, Bedoya, who is wonderful, who both got canned by the Trump administration or doged or whatever the hell. And hopefully someday when things are more normal, that kind of group can come back, because breaking up monopolies, the government actually has a lot of power, and states have power to say, no, this is not okay. And we should be using those powers that we have to break up monopolies even further. Kroger should be broke up even further. Walmart should be broken up. Amazon should be broken up. There should be none of this big, we love small businesses. We love humans. We love people. We love our communities. We want our grocery stores to be locally owned and sourced. Like, what has happened? It's gotten out of control, and we don't have to live like that. But anyway, the Kroger-Albertsons merger, we blocked it. I'm sure Kroger-Albertsons not the hugest fan of me, but that's okay. I don't give a shit. So that was a really good fight. And the main point of that whole fight is even when you lose, you win. We got access to information. If you fight and lose, just be an AI human and learn from the loss and take whatever that you learned and try to win. Don't give up. Just try a different thing. You know, it's like, you have to be relentless and persistent, and there'll be a crack that opens up, and workers will be able to run through that crack and open up the space so that we can have a better world. But what I see is people giving up. I see some hopelessness. I see people sitting on big chunks of money. You know, use your money right now. If you ever had a chance, if the labor movement ever had a chance, all that money you're holding back, use it to organize so that we have a chance to win.
Yeah, now's the time.
Now's the time.
Faye, I love your attitude. And I'll tell you, that money you spent on law school definitely was worth it. I mean, you got a lot going over there up in now you're based in what, Seattle?
Headquarter 1 is in Des Moines, headquarter 2 is in Spokane, and then we have several offices out in more rural parts of the state. And and the way we got our strike fund is every member, $2 per member per month goes into the strike fund. And we use the strike fund. We have strike teams that go in and get workers ready for striking. We have strike pay that's set by the board. So when strikers strike, they can not be starved out by the company. We've had 5 strikes in the last 2.5 years that I've led. And we've won all of those. And in a strike, people need to, just on the strike stuff, you can win a strike even if it's not perfect. You don't win everything you want in a strike. What you win is resetting the relationship with management, finding new leaders who are militant, who want to fight, and who have the trust of their coworkers. If somebody can get 20 of their coworkers to go out on strike, you've got a leader who should be trained and become an organizer or become a rep or become whatever the hell. We need these militant people who understand how to get understand the shop floor, understand how to get their coworkers to overcome their fear, to help lead the labor movement. So striking helps you find those people. So that's a whole nother thing we could talk about. But I just think we have lost some of the tools that labor has had in the past to build power. And we better get those tools out fast, and we better get all our money out, and we better fight right now, or we're in big, big trouble.
Well, Faye, I'm going to let you go because you got to get back to the fight.
Yeah,
I don't want to hold you up here, girl. So, and I can see us talking a whole lot more here on America's Workforce. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Faye Guenther, president of the Food and Commercial Workers. This would be a local 3000. And the website is UFCW3000.org. You stay safe, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Sounds good. Bye. Thank you so much. Go fight, win.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce coming up tomorrow, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.